government has been accused of sabotaging the Grooming Gang's national inquiry. It's as two survivors quit the liaison panel after claiming that they had been silenced.
Well, in response, Number 10 said it is working to secure the right candidate for the role, adding that they will not provide a running commentary on the appointment. Fionna Goddard, one of the victims who quit the panel, joined Patrick Christie's last night, and here she explains her reasons.
They asked us to sign a confidentiality agreement which centres around survivors' anonymity and making sure that their opinions were protected. So we all agreed with that because survivors' anonymity is really important, and we signed it, but then it slowly developed into them telling us not to disclose any impressions we got, any material we were given, or anything, like basically anything. By the end of it, we wasn't allowed to talk about anything to anyone.
Now, here to develop this story, our national reporter Charlie Peters is in the studio, and you have someone to talk to this morning, Charlie.
That's right, Eamon and Ellie. This morning, we're hearing so much concern from survivors engaging with this process, because today, the two prospective chairs will be interviewed by those remaining members on this liaison panel, engaging with the Home Office on this inquiry. But for weeks now, we've been reporting concerns shared internally by the victims on that panel. I mean, last week we revealed that many survivors, not just those who have quit so far, were telling GB News that they felt that the scope of the inquiry was being expanded, that the terms of reference could be looking beyond specifically grooming gangs into wider issues of exploitation and abuse. And of course, that raised concerns because they think that this could become a mini ICSA, the Independent Inquiry into Child Sexual Abuse. They go over all topics that have already been investigated and fail to really have a specific focus on this form of abuse that they say, and many campaigners and families say, has never properly been investigated. And as this panel gathers today, Eamon and Ellie, we know, because we revealed it last night, that the survivors interviewing those two prospective chairs, a former police officer and a former social worker, they've actually been asked to submit their questions in advance. 2 questions, and they were also given guidance on what to ask. Now, Tom Crowther, who was the chair of the Telford inquiry, he said last night publicly in reaction to this exclusive on GB News, he said, this is basically not what we'd ever do at Telford. There shouldn't be a staged, managed process. He was sounding frustrated in private correspondence as well, sharing his anger at this management of the process. And instead, survivors should be able to come forward and ask questions without them being seen in advance by the Home Office. Well, one of the people who won't be speaking to those two prospective chairs, because she's quit the panel last night, is Ellie Reynolds, who joins me now, a survivor of the grooming gangs from Barrow. Ellie, good morning, and thank you very much for joining us on GB News Breakfast. Your letter is very powerful, announcing your decision to quit the panel. Can you just explain why you've taken that decision?
I think previously what you were just discussing is right. Everything that Fionna said, the emails about the drafted questions and being given indication on what we should be telling them or what we should be asking them. I actually replied to that email and said to the lady in question, is it mandatory that we're doing this 24 hours before? Because then they've had 24 hours to sit on this and then we're getting a scripted answer ultimately. The way that they came across was very controlling and manipulative. They did gaslight us into thinking that we had nowhere to turn apart from them. It was, we're not allowed to talk to even survivors on the panel if we feel a little bit overwhelmed and we need support. We weren't allowed to talk to survivors on the panel. We weren't allowed to talk to family. We weren't allowed to discuss it anywhere. We had to go to them. It was almost, when you look at the wider view, like an exploitation mechanism, which is sad because we all had faith that this inquiry was going to be the one to get us justice. There was an uproar. People wanted it done. I wasn't necessarily keen on Keir Starmer. He never wanted it done in the first place. He was very reluctant. But this inquiry, we genuinely had faith that it was going to serve its purpose, and we've literally just watched it collapse underneath us.
And Ellie, we've heard Fiona saying that she felt as though she was being silenced. You spoke about the limits on how survivors have been allowed to speak to each other about this. Now, one of the survivors who's still on the panel told me last week that the restrictions on what they could say felt even more restrictive than, say, a jury for a criminal trial, not being allowed to speak to one another about the case outside of court when they're not all gathered together. What did you think of those decisions to limit how you could speak to one another, and has that impacted your ability to engage with the process?
Well, I agree with the girls. That's exactly what happened. And I think what they've painted a picture and trying to do is that they've tried to divide us, to weaken us. If we can't seek support from each other, we'll then got to be divided. And then, obviously, when the chairs got leaked, we then kind of turned against each other and started being, reluctant to trust one another. So ultimately it was causing a division and a weakness within the survivors, which I think is what they wanted, because to be honest, the way that I see it is that the survivors have been underestimated again, and because they were united and they came across powerful and they had good reasonings and good questions and good opinions, it was shut down relatively quickly.
And Ellie, you've also expressed concerns, which we've heard from many survivors anonymously as well, engaging with the Home Office on this, that you felt as though the terms of reference could be expanded, looking beyond specifically grooming gangs. And if the inquiry loses that focus, then it might not drill down to what you've described as sort of the racial and religious motivations behind some of these crimes. Did you feel as though there was an effort to expand the scope and talk about something other than these abuse networks?
Yeah. I think we all became a little bit fearful to say what ethnicity our abusers were, and it should be like that. We were trying to say, we've never disputed that there was white paedophiles, there was black paedophiles, but ultimately every time that we mentioned grooming gangs being predominantly Asian men, it was shut down very fast, to the point where, we were very apprehensive to whether we could even mention that. And sometimes it needs to be uncomfortable. Sometimes we need to be able to say the ethnicity of these men, because they're who are doing it to us. So, yeah, I believe that caused a whitewash. It was watering down the fact that these active grooming gangs in the UK, and they are predominantly Asian men.
Well, the Home Office has said last night that they disagree with the claim that it's been watered down, but we have heard a lot of concerns from survivors on the panel on this. Ellie, finally, what is your message now to the government as they continue to attempt to launch this national inquiry into the grooming gangs? What do you want them to do, and what sort of person do you want to chair it? Do you want a judge rather than a police officer or social worker?
Yeah, I think a judge, it needs to be a police officer, a social worker. They're instantly biased. Police officers and social workers have been known to fail us in the past. I mean, it wasn't long ago I covered a story on the social worker that witnessed an underage marriage. Plenty of social workers and police officers, I think they're scared of it getting out there because their jobs are then in jeopardy. And I think if you're not going to do it properly, why are you doing it anyway? I think my message to the Home Office and the government would be well scripted but not scripted enough, because you underestimated the power of the survivors yet again. And when you realise you can't do that, it'll serve you well.
Okay, Ellie Reynolds, thank you so much for your time and your bravery this morning. Thank you. Well, there you go, Ellie-ann. Very strong language from Ellie there, saying that she wants the government to take far more action on this than they currently are.
Charlie, thank you very much indeed, and thank you for keeping on top of this particular story. Ellie, thank you as well. Still to come.
Retailers